Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, publisher of Aspire Magazine, the premier inspirational magazine for women since 2006. And you know, if you have been listening to this show for as many years as I've been on, you know I love talking about some magical topics, one of them being intuition, being aligned with our source of inspiration. So I'm so excited today because Emma Seppälä is joining me today. She's a psychologist, author, researcher, specializing in well-being, resilience, happiness, and mindfulness. She serves as the science director of the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford University, where she conducts research and teaches courses on these topics. Her work focuses on understanding the science behind human flourishing and how individuals can cultivate greater well-being. She has been a contributor to numerous publications such as Harvard Business Review, Psychology Today, and many others. She's also a sought-after speaker and consultant worldwide. She has some extraordinary books, too: The Happiness Track, How to Apply the Science of Happiness to Accelerate Your Success, as well as the Happiness Track Workbook. And I'm so excited because she has a new book that just got released at the time you're listening to this podcast, and it is called Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos. Emma, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Linda.
Well, I have to tell you, your work is transformational and magical. And when I saw the name of your new book, maybe it's because it's what I've experienced myself. I feel like I'm finally coming into my sovereign self, that I'm like, I have got to get her on this show and have this whole conversation about intuition. So, you know, everybody's on a different path, right? And different parts of the spiral, I like to say. So for our listeners, how do you describe what intuition is and how it differs from our rational, that decision-making part of us?
So you can think of intuition as different things. You could think of it as a gut feeling. You could think of it as an instinct. You could think of it as hyper awareness. There are different ways from a scientific perspective that it gets described. We know that we share certain instincts with animals, but we may or may not be in touch as they are. So we know that animals start to act funny before an earthquake, or they can predict, environmental calamities. And how is it that they have that and we don't? We do. We just have been often trained out of it because in our school system, rationality and logic and reason are trained, and they're wonderful tools, of course, and very necessary. But we've been often trained out of this sort of instinctual gut feeling that we have that is also designed to save our life.
That relates, because I can remember being a really creative, sensitive child when I was young, and it was like, no, you have to do it this way, but my creative soul wanted to do it another way. So our creativity, do you feel, is connected also to that intuition, to that place that is a higher self?
Absolutely. So we know that we're most creative at times when our brain is in alpha wave mode. So before I go into that, Linda, when do you come up with your best ideas? Or if you're working on a problem in your life and you're trying to figure out a solution, what kind of activities are you doing when you come up with your aha solutions?
Usually walking in nature, or I like to do mandala coloring books, usually early in the morning.
Yeah.
And when I'm not in my, I say when I'm not in my conscious mind thinking about my grocery list.
Exactly. So when we're doing a relaxing activity, it could be, like you said, coloring, it could be walking in nature, it could be meditating, it could be taking a bath, it could be in the shower, walking your dog. These types of activities where we're not actively focused on something is when our brain is actually in alpha wave mode. So it's not highly focused, but it's also not lethargic. It's in that in-between space which you can think of as a place of receptivity. And Einstein he attributed many of his findings to intuition. And that's why he liked to go and sit in a room and listen to Mozart, which we know from research triggers the alpha wave brainwaves. And he himself claimed that many of his findings came from intuition. And he says intuition is so necessary, and yet we have poo-pooed it. And I think a lot of artists, and if you've ever read Elizabeth Gilbert's book Big Magic, I love how she talks about that as well. How so many artists have come up with their thoughts, their ideas in those kinds of times. And I myself, in writing my new book, Sovereign, there was poetry that came to me, and I've never really sat down and written poetry, but it came. I would hear the sentences, and I just felt like I would just write them down. And um, and I would say both of my books have come to me largely in that way. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I know how to add the science. I know how it fits in, but in large percentage, the books come to me in this sort of receptive mode, usually meditation. So, you could think of it as receiving messages from the universe, or you could think of it as your brain being in active problem solving mode when you're not engaging it in some activity. But it's really fascinating because over the last couple decades, creativity scores in children, you were mentioning being so creative as a child, have drastically plummeted. And what's been happening in schools? Well, there's more and more emphasis on STEM and, rationality and logic at the expense of the arts. And also there's technology. So the more kids are on screens, the less they are in a daydreaming kind of mode. So little children, if you look 6, 7, 8, 9, if they're not on a screen, they're, like I have a couple of those at home, and they're just grabbing all my boxes and my trash and recycling and creating robots. And, they're so creative because they're in that state and their mind is in the present moment. Where it can be so receptive, so creative. So creativity is absolutely linked here to you could think of it as a form of intuition.
For me, it is. I mean, and I know for my audience that's been following this show for 8 years, as soon as you said, like a divine download, right? I'm like, they're all like, yes, that's how I receive.
Right.
I've been
Mhm.
pretty open that even Aspire magazine, I didn't say I'm going to publish a magazine. It was the last thing on my mind after closing a retail store. It was given to me as an intuitive download, even though I didn't have that language to describe it 18 years ago. But everything has been birthed through me, as you just shared about how your books come through you. Yes, you have the science that you put into it, but you receive the content. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely. And especially this
Yeah.
last book, I felt like the book came and was like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I had a choice, and when I sat down to write it, I knew absolutely what was going in each chapter. Everything was laid out in front of me without a question. And I absolutely felt like it was received for these times. And the messaging is hopefully very concrete and very, practical, but it's really to help give us tools in this time of hyper distraction, in this time of chaos on the global front, in this time of uncertainty on so many levels. And in this time when many of us have abdicated our sovereignty without even realizing it because we've bought into messaging, beliefs, addictive habits, um, and ways of thinking that have cut us off from our true selves, from actually even knowing who we are, how valuable we are, um, what we even think, what is even our own perspective. Oftentimes we don't even know because we are so embroiled in everybody else's perspective and messaging that's out there. So so sovereignty is really an invitation to come back to yourself. And in that way, be able to live in the fullest expression of yourself, which is a gift to everybody else. There's that statistic of 70% of people on their deathbed regret not living the life that they wanted to live. I mean, it's so tragic when you think about it. And certainly intuition is one powerful way, one powerful guide to help you. Again, not at the expense of reason and logic, but as Einstein said, those should be faithful servants, right? So the book came to me as an intuition, but then I had to apply my logic and reason to actually write it well and so forth.
Yeah, it's like this for myself, and it sounds like, as you just described your journey, it's this balance between masculine and feminine, right? The feminine is the receiving. That's when we get the divine, for myself, the divine downloads to start the magazine, the radio show, and I have 5 other media brands. But if I didn't ground the vision, the what I received, I couldn't bring it to manifestation. So we have to do the work. We have to do the strategies, which is a little more the masculine. Like, I think it's a beautiful dance between the two, and you need both. As we just,
Absolutely.
we use different words to describe it, but I'm loving this conversation. We're going to take our first break, and we'll be back shortly. And I can't wait to dive in.
Inspiration for a woman's soul. Aspire magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me today is Dr. Emma Seppälä, a psychologist, author, researcher, and author of the new book, Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos. So we were just talking about, and I know my listeners are really resonating, because we just love talking about trusting in our intuition, or I use divine downloads a lot, but I'm curious. So can intuition be developed or trained, or is it something we came here with and we've just forgotten, or is it both?
It's both. From what I've seen, and both in the science and also have seen myself, and I'll explain. So society sort of trains us into just focusing on the logic and the reasonable and dismissing everything else as magical thinking. And yet I'm going to share some science with you just to show you how what's developing on that front. So we know, for one, that the military has been studying intuition for decades under various names. It was made fun of in a movie called Men Who Stare at Goats, but then they started a new intuition initiative shortly thereafter, because so many soldiers came back from Afghanistan and Iraq reporting that they had not gone down one road that they were ordered to go down, because they had a feeling, and then they saved their own lives or the lives of others. And there were so many reports of that the military has started a new top secret program. In fact, for my book, I could not get any of the primary investigators to talk to me. They would not respond. So I know it's top secret, but I did talk to another military scientist to confirm that it is indeed happening. And it has been happening for decades. And I also talked to a Marine who was trained in this, in one particular intuition program that the military teaches, which has more to do with hyper awareness. So I think you could think of intuition in various ways. Like you said, you can think of it as a download, receptivity. The Einstein method, maybe we could call it that as well. And then there's another one, which is just being so fully present that you see what's happening around you. And that's what the military has been training so far in terms of their program. It's called Combat Hunter Training. And a fellow scientist, a neuroscientist, Joe Michaels, I interviewed him for the book as well. He's a former colleague and a delightful person. And what he looked at was decision making. And he found that when decisions are complicated, then when you go with your gut feeling, you're going to make a better decision than if you were to try to deliberate it all rationally. So he thinks of intuition as a feeling. And we all know what it's like to have a feeling. I have a funny feeling about this. I have a good feeling. I have a bad feeling, right? And so he looked at decision making, like I said. So if you have an easy decision, for example, your phone is broken, should you buy a new one or not? Okay, so that's not a hard decision to make. You may not need your intuition for that. But let's say you get a job in another city and you have to decide, well, if I go, my kids have to switch schools, I got to get a new house. It's going to be this new environment. It may be challenging. Should I do it? Should I not do it? And it's complicated. There are a lot of factors at play. And that's where his research shows going with your feeling is actually going to lead to a better decision-making process. So that is really, really interesting. And, in addition to that research, can it be trained? You were asking. I had the privilege of observing intuition courses that have been developed in India for children, specifically for children by someone called Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He has an organization called Art of Living. It teaches meditation and breathing practices. And he developed this program for children only. And so far, and he says it's because children have not already been deconditioned. They don't already have too many preconceptions in their mind. And in which they teach intuition. It's like a 2-day program. It's just a couple hours, really. And I enrolled my son in this, and I went to the second day of the class. And they let the parents come in at one point, and you can walk around the room, and the kids are blindfolded doing an intuition activity. And in this case, it was that they had one picture that was in color and one picture that was in black and white, and they were meant to pick the right color and color in the black and white picture with their pens exactly to match the colored one. Okay, but they're blindfolded, and they have to choose the pens blindfolded, and they don't know what the image is. And I walked in and I saw this tiny little 5-year-old drawing into the exact corners of the bear's ears, just as if he had his eyes open. And I had tears rolling down my face because it was such a shock. As adults who have been so trained out of the idea that the brain could possibly do something like this, that I couldn't contain my tears at seeing, wow, the amount of potential that exists in a human that we have not even begun to tap into. And this program is also being held in schools for the blind in India. And you can actually look it up on YouTube. If you look up Intuition Project Blind Schools in Art of Living, you'll find it very moving to see these blind kids, who have no vision, and they're telling you what they're using their hands, and they could tell you what color it is, the pen is that they're holding. They could tell you what the image is that's under their fingers, even though it's not in Braille. It's not, they basically, how does this tie to sovereignty? You're giving these kids sovereignty. You're giving the blind sovereignty to see. You're giving these little children the ability to intuit their environment. And I have the good fortune of mentoring a 21-year-old girl who has been doing this intuition process since she was a teenager. And she told me, I just have a feeling I know what's going to happen with certain people. So she was friends with a group of girls, and then all of a sudden she felt like moving away from that group. And a week later they were arrested for drug use or something, and just imagine the sovereignty. If you are training children to listen to their intuition, it's so powerful. I could go on about this, but it's just we don't know. And I think most neuroscientists will agree with this. I know they would, that we just don't know this. We don't know much about how the brain works. And we know there are areas of the brain that probably have cognitive faculties we haven't even begun to discover yet, at least on the scientific level.
It just amazes me. Like I get as passionate as you do about the children because they're the future of the world, right? They're to be able to have that sovereignty over themselves and trust their intuition because it's going to become so ingrained in them. And
Yeah.
you said you had young children at home. I have a 13-year-old granddaughter and a soon to be 23-year-old grandson, both sensitives and empaths, and especially the little one, highly intuitive. And we nurtured that here. Like she is so creative. So she has a bigger crystal collection. I'm like, what are you feeling? But I know how important it is, and it breaks my heart for so many children where it's being, like you said, programmed out of them. Like to watch her in her joy and connect with animals and I'll share one story. This is what blows me away. And I know we all have this access. Ever since she could walk, so we'll say about 18 months, we have a little, I guess you can call it a journal. It now has laminated pages. As of now, she has over 30 four-leaf clovers. And we put the dates. But here's what she said one day, Emma. She picked one, she found one, and she gave it to her grandpa. And then she goes, "Oh no, Alma, I have to find you one." But of course, I went into my logical mind, like, I didn't say this to her, but inside I'm like, oh my God, how's she going to find another one? She's going to be disappointed because she don't have one for grandma. Do you know, she went outside and we were watching in the window and she's rubbing her hands over the grass, bends over, picks it up, comes running in the house, and we're looking at her like, so I said, McKenna, how do you do that? How do you always find four-leaf clovers? You know what she said? I asked them where they are. And
So
guess what? It was so simple what she said, but I had tears in my eyes because I'm like, she has no doubt in her capability. Like she looked at us like we had four heads, like you just asked, Mama. And that's what you're talking about, right? That innate, we're all born with it.
I just love that. That is so so beautiful. And my son is similar to that. And sometimes at night I massage his feet before he goes to sleep. And the other day he was like, "Mom, you need vitamin C and you need a liver cleanse and you need some lavender and chamomile tea." Like, and I was
You
like,
know?
and he knows it. And yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it is there. It needs to be nurtured and not, like you said, yeah, programmed out of them. And it's extraordinary. And by the way, that 21-year-old that I mentor, she and her sister are routinely called for things like missing passports and so forth. But the other day, someone called them for missing person. It was a teenager that had run away from home in their city in Canada where they live. And she and her sister sat down in meditation, and she said the street names were fuzzy, but we could locate the statues and the other sort of telltale signs about the neighborhood. So they could locate the neighborhood, and she said they could even see the shed where the girl was sleeping behind the shed. And
Wow.
they helped the parents found the girl, and they've since helped find two other missing people. One of which was a gentleman with Alzheimer's in the middle of Bangalore in India, which is a very big city, and they helped. So I mean, it's extraordinary to think about the potential that our human mind has and what happens when you raise a generation of children with this ability. And I love hearing about your granddaughter, and I'm so glad she's growing up with you. That is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the blessed one, but I get it because as a creative and someone, and I have a lot of private clients who come to me and they said, Lynn, I was stifled as a child. You're too sensitive. You feel too much. And then what they do, they stuffed it. And now they're waking up in their 40s, 50s, and 60s going, I am done with this feeling that something is wrong with me. And they're reclaiming themselves. But man, they have to do so much deconditioning
Yes, and that
because
Mhm.
that's so painful to witness.
Absolutely. And that's why I wrote my book, because that's why it's called Reclaim. That word reclaim had to be in it. I knew that. And that's why it's reclaim your freedom, energy, and power in a time of distraction, uncertainty, and chaos. Everything is uh everything could pull us away from listening to our own inner voice, to honoring our own selves. And this book is an invitation to open that awareness and do just that.
And I love that you put reclaim in it. We're going to take a break, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on that because every time I see the word reclaim, I feel this energetic nudge that we're reclaiming what we already are, but we've forgotten.
Yes, I
It's
love that.
that's that word, right? Like, so when I see that, I'm like, yes.
Mhm.
So we're going to be back in a moment, my friends. Stay with us.
Blending science and intuition, functional nutritionist and board-certified holistic nutrition and healthy gut specialist Mary Beth Gadavich supports women to get to the root of their health issues, their gut. Mary Beth is committed to supporting women to enhance their mind, body, and spirit connection, soothe their gut, and reclaim optimal health through intuitive guidance, bio-individual nutrition, and lifestyle plans, as well as chakra work, energy clearing, and meditation. She often supports women with autoimmune disease, digestive issues, chronic fatigue, and food sensitivities. Mary Beth is the founder of Bella Nutrition Services and is also a certified nutrition therapy practitioner, master nutrition therapist, functional nutrition lifestyle practitioner, and certified gluten practitioner. Learn more at bellanutritionservices.com.
Thanks for circling up with us today. This is Linda Joy, host of Inspired Conversations, and I'm with Emma Seppälä today. And we're talking about a new book and so much more. And her new book, please get on over there to Amazon or any of your online book retailers, or of course, your local bookstores. Support them. Sovereign, reclaim your your freedom, energy, and power in a time of distraction, uncertainty, and chaos. So I have a question. It's really more of a personal question. What led you to this work, and following, were you always intuitive as a child? Because you went into, you're science-based, but you're so intuitive.
Mhm. I think, I mean, I was always interested in what lies beyond, our, the things that we're learning in school. I went to Yale as an undergraduate, and I was a bit frustrated by, here we're learning so many things, but we never learn about things like compassion. We don't learn things about the meaning of life. Like, those were things that I was frustrated because it kept us in this hyper educated world where you just don't tread beyond that, beyond what the quote unquote known. And also I was craving for those values, the compassion, the altruism, those kinds of things. There was a certain elitism that was all about being the best. But to me, I I felt like the best quote unquote people that we want to aspire to are not the wealthy and the famous and the powerful, but the people who are making a big difference and helping others. To me, that was always those are the royalty, and I
Yeah.
just was frustrated by not having that education until I went to China after college, and there it was very interesting because I was in this communist country where there was absolutely no talk of that either. But then I would go to Tibet and see, the poor farmers prostrating in the mud and meditating and in the harshness of the conditions and being oppressed, and their country invaded and not allowed to worship as they pleased and so forth. And I would see this sovereignty regardless, and this dignity and this spirituality that was really impressive. And I thought, gosh, there's something there. And I saw these people, and in China also, among the Chinese people, I saw people who had nothing, but were grateful for everything. And they were so much happier and stronger than a lot of Americans I had met who had everything, were grateful for nothing. There was a wisdom there. There was a wisdom that I saw in some of the people's eyes that I thought, what is that? Let's go there. So I came back and I did a master's in East Asian studies and Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, Vedanta, those kinds of topics at Columbia in New York City. And I had the good fortune of being a student of Bob Thurman's. I don't know if you know him. He's a Tibetan Buddhist scholar, also known as the father of Uma Thurman. But she's probably her greatness probably comes from him. I mean, he is just so phenomenal. And he was the first professor who actually spoke about, what is everything? Everything is void. Everything is, it was just
Yeah.
really, life is a dream. And, I was so inspired. And then I took a class, it was 9/11, and I was in New York, and I had a lot of anxiety after witnessing this, the second plane crash, and my body would shake in the morning. And I'd try meditating, and it was really hard for me because when you have a lot of anxiety and trauma, it's really hard to meditate. And I walked into a class called the Art of Living class, and I learned a breathing practice that really helped me. And this is the class that was created by Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who also created the intuition program for kids. So, and then I really got interested in, wow, like there are these ancient practices that can heal the human mind. I was able to then successfully go on to grad school, to the number one psych grad school at Stanford University. And it was just everything was falling into place once my mind was falling into place. And I decided I wanted to research on the benefits of meditation and breathing and compassion on people's well-being, on populations with trauma like veterans, and so forth. So that was my personal path. So yes, trained scientifically, and interested in what can really help humans not just cope but thrive.
I always ask that question because I found that a high percentage of my guests are like me, that it was our own journey that led us to our soul's work,
Mm.
right? And there's something that you brought back such a memory for me. And I mean, you said verbatim what my daughter said when we took her to Costa Rica for the first time when she was 15. We've been going for 30 years. And for reference, my daughter's now about to be 40, so it was a long time ago. And she hadn't been out of the country, and we were in the inner part away from the beach and traveling this road. And you'd see all these little houses as Tico houses, and a lot of them just had the slab for a porch. But every morning when we're going by at 6 a.m., Emma, they would be out there sweeping this slab, right, with this biggest smile. And it went on for a couple hours. She kept seeing all these homes, and she said the exact words you said. She goes, Mom, and she went to private schools here. She goes, Mom, back home, they have everything and they're grateful for nothing. They don't have anything. They have holes in their roofs and they're smiling and they'll give you a piece of bread and they're so grateful. I
Mm.
know that it was a pivotal moment. And she's the mother of that little 13-year-old I was telling you about. And that was a pivotal moment in her life. And I could hear that it was a powerful, pivotal moment in your life. And I love that you, in all your work, it's this powerful blend because I can feel your spirituality, your intuition, your connection with your divine source, and this beautiful scientific wisdom that you bring to the table. I think it's just such a powerful combination.
Thank you, Linda. I see myself as a translator.
Yes.
Um, how do I translate some of this knowledge for people to understand it? And the language of science is really approachable for people. And I'm just fortunate to be able to do some of that translation work. And now the science is really catching up with a lot of things that we've may have only just intuitively felt in the past.
It's well, thankfully it's catching up, right? So, what role does intuition play in our daily lives and decision-making processes? I know we talked a little bit about the decision-making, but we're using it all the time, even if we don't know we are. That's what I've noticed with my friends. They're like, I'm not intuitive, Linda. And then they tell me a story. I'm like, that was your intuition.
Hmm.
But do you find a lot of people don't know that it's intuition? They don't know how to identify it?
Well, yes, I think for one, if we just go about our lives from one thing to the next in a reactive way, plus we take in over 60,000 gigabytes of information every day across all our media channels, the average American, which is enough to crash a small computer in a week. I mean, it's a lot. And if someone is just living like that, reactively taking in information all day, never spending time in meditation, contemplation, quiet, then it's likely that they're not in touch because they've completely abandoned that sort of self-awareness muscle. And self-awareness, we know the brain has neural pathways dedicated to self-awareness, and it's easy to just not activate those if you're constantly stimulating yourself and focus on the outside world. So I do think certain level of contemplative activity in your life is important to be in touch at all. I think the other thing to be aware of is, and that's where the self-awareness is so critical, is to make sure that you are acting out of intuition and not fear or some other kind of belief or imprint in your mind from your past, from what you've heard. And I think that it's important to be discerning with regard to that, right? It could be like, oh, well, I have a gut feeling I shouldn't go on stage and give that keynote. Well, are you also deathly afraid of public speaking? Um,
Yeah.
so it's important to have that discernment. And I think meditation is, or any kind of contemplative activity daily, is critical to train both your nervous system and your brain to discern and to be very self-aware of when, an emotion that's coming up is you, or is it actually a feeling about someone else. And um but I had a friend who was in one of the Twin Towers during 9/11, and the guards were saying everybody stay inside, and he had a gut feeling to run, and he ran, and he saved his life by a hair. And he literally jumped on the last boat going to New Jersey, like he jumped over the water like to the boat. And some people will tell you intuition is something you cannot but do, you know? In that moment, he had a split second and he just knew he had to go, and so, and I think, moms, especially, there are moments when we probably did something without thinking about it rationally because we just knew that was what we needed to do for our child in that moment. Um, and so I think when something is like that, it's often also and intuition. But yeah, I do think it's important to have that self-awareness practice and meditation in our lives to discern. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking back to a lot of the things you said, and I'm like, I can remember in my younger years, my first 35 years, I know it was a trauma response. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. I was in such anxiety, so anxiety would lead me to need to control things, which means I was so tightly constricted, I couldn't hear
Mm.
my intuition. And what was I doing? Making decisions from fear all the time.
Right.
And now, for 30 years since I've been on this path, I'm going to be 62. I was like, I can have the contrast now of remembering that what it felt like in my body. Now clients and peers say, how have you created all these businesses? I go, I listen, I take action. I listen, I trust, I take action. I don't question. And I know that the more we follow our intuition, it's like builds our intuitive trust muscles. So
Mhm.
now we don't have to go, oh, well, was that my intuition? Should I do this? Now for me, it's like instant.
Instant. And you
Yeah.
have a meditation practice.
Oh, I have to say, no, I don't have the meditation practice because I always struggled with that. Do I have mindfulness practices in every moment? Like I love guided meditations, but
Yes.
so I do. So let me correct myself. Yes, I do. I don't do regular meditation, but I do love my guided meditations. But one day, and then we'll take a break because I want to share this for every listener who thinks they can't meditate. For many years, I thought meditation meant I had to sit cross-legged in a silent position. And if you couldn't do that, then, you weren't disciplined enough. And one day, and it was actually maybe 10 years ago, in our big house next door, we live right in the middle of the woods on the water. It's very peaceful. And I was washing a cup and I was watching the squirrels outside. And I was like so I can't explain it. It was the most magical moment, and I go, "Oh my goodness, Linda, you've been meditating for years. You
Mm,
just don't need to be doing it then. I can go into those moments and be fully present in my life where everything feels so alive." So
mm.
yes, I do in that way. Um,
Yes.
and that's what I wanted to talk about. Well, let's take our break because I actually wanted to talk about some like how do mindfulness practices and self-awareness contribute? And maybe you could share a few in our last segment.
Mhm.
We'll be back in a moment, my friends.
Your truest, deepest desires are calling you. The question is, will you answer the call? Former high-tech Fortune 500 leader Sharon Seberg knows how it feels to wear busyness as a badge of honor and to smother her dreams with the expectations of others. Walking away from her successful yet unfulfilling career, she chose to live a life connected to her intuitive wisdom and divine truth, and now lives a life of fulfillment, peace, and abundance. Today, Sharon is a neurotransformational coach, feminine power facilitator, and the visionary founder of the Soul Alignment Formula. She empathetically fuses cutting-edge neuroscience with intuitive coaching, supporting successful women to unlock their full potential so they can live a life of authenticity and freedom. Are you ready to excavate your deepest desires and bring them to life? Start by visiting SharonSeberg.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. So Emma, right before the break, we talked about mindfulness and meditation. This is our last segment. So I'm really curious, just to help the listeners understand, is there a difference between mindfulness and meditation? Is meditation the modality and mindfulness is the place you go? How would you describe that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I love what you said. Your connection with nature and your ability to come into the present moment is meditation. And the truth is that most people, unless they're glued to a screen 24/7, which some people are, do enter periods of meditation throughout the day without realizing it. Whether you're just in the zone in the car, just driving or just being or just cuddling with your child, right? But is there a difference? Mindfulness is a type of meditation, mindfulness meditation, a Buddhist meditation practice that was really championed by scientists. And I believe that the reason why it was so championed is that scientists' job is to observe, analyze, and label. And that's a little bit what meditation, mindfulness practice is. You're observing your thoughts, maybe labeling them, and so forth. For me, I've always found it to be a very cognitive exercise, and I have not found it to be useful for me as a practice. And I always say, if meditation didn't work for you, you just didn't find the shoe that fit yet. And there are
Yeah.
many practices. And for me, mindfulness, I'm already in my head. I'm a writer, I'm a scientist. I'm already, I've got a lot going on upstairs. Like, I don't need another cognitive exercise. And I have never found it to be as peace-giving as other practices. So for myself, I practice the sky breath meditation, which is really a breathing technique, the one from The Art of Living I was mentioning earlier, that really helped me after trauma, and that I've in our research studies really helps with trauma with veterans and other populations. But then I use a mantra-based meditation, which I find helps get me out of my head. Or most of the time, I use a guided meditation like you, Linda. And I think a lot of times, like, people do think, oh, well, like you said, I have to sit in lotus position. No, sit in your couch. As long as you're not slouched over and sleeping, like, you're fine. You can just be comfortable. And I love my guided meditations. I do them twice a day. I use an app called Sattva, which I love, Sattva. I use that every day. But the point is making time, and this is a revolutionary thing to do in a time where everything is moving so fast, so quickly, so much stimulation, so much rush. It's revolutionary to sit, close your eyes, and turn your attention away from all that. And yet, I think it's imperative, because it's imperative to find balance. How many people feel unbalanced? How many people, a large percentage of people, find that they have to turn to recreational drugs, whether it's alcohol or whether it's medication or whatever. And I always wonder how many people would find those things unnecessary if they just made the time to find balance by doing the opposite of the rush, and helping to train their nervous system and their parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the fight or flight, to settle down. And that's absolutely where you would find that you get more in touch with your intuition, but also that you find relief from the stress, which is daily life.
No, you're speaking to my heart. And what you mentioned mantras, and I love Ho'oponopono prayer. But do you have a specific mantra, or do you just have a bunch of favorites? I do like an I am affirmation. If I can feel like, say I'm worried about someone, I'm like, oh no, we're sending love, we're not sending fear. That's a story you're creating. And I'll repeat it. Like for me, if I'm going into something like an anxious moment, like worried, like my mom was having health issues, I would go, in this moment, all is well. And the moment I would say that to myself, I'd come back into my truth, not my head and my fears. And so that was like my mantra. Do you have a favorite one?
I love that. Yeah. So the mantra meditation I learned is one where, again, I learned through Art of Living. I've done all of my training through Art of Living after benefiting. Um, so they give you a secret mantra. So you have
Okay, that's
your very
okay.
own, and you just share it with yourself. But I also do like chanting mantras, because I find that settles me down. So I'll use beads and do like Om Namah Shivaya or something. Yeah, Om Namah Shivaya usually I do.
That's beautiful. And I think it's something when you said about, like, in the title of the book, in the times of distraction, uncertainty, and chaos. I've had such contrast in my life because in those younger years, looking back, I was in that chaos and uncertainty because of trauma. I was always running from myself. So I was always in chaos because I wasn't stopping to be. I was one
Mhm.
building my other business when I got off welfare 30 something years ago. I built my first business. But it was so unbalanced because I was in that pushing, chasing, striving, looking for outside accolades to get my worth. Went
Mhm.
through my spiritual awakening in 91 and said, oh no, I'm done going out there for my worth. I have to find it within. So it's been a 32-year journey inward. And for me, that's where peace is. That's where sovereignty is. So this whole conversation has really been about that, right? We are always being intuitively guided. We have practices we can turn to, like mindfulness practices, and just taking time to be. That was the biggest thing for me. I didn't know how to be. That was my biggest struggle when I was making the transition. I'm like, my worth is I have to go 100 miles an hour and fill every day of the week.
Yes.
It,
And
it, and that's what's happening. The culture is that now. And my business, I have an intentional life, an intentional business. I teach it. That's my brand. And I say to my clients, listen, when I started giving myself Fridays off, taking 14 weeks off a year, it's built in my company schedule. My team gets time off. I said, believe it or not, my business increased. And I'm more peaceful, grounded, centered than the old days when I might have made almost the same amount of money, but at what cost? Right? And that's what's happening in the world. That's what I see is we're chasing and we're forgetting.
absolutely, I could not agree more. And that's also why I wrote my first book, The Happiness Track, because I was seeing all this and I was looking and experiencing it myself. And when you look at the science, you're going to be more successful when you do the opposite, which is exactly what you're doing and exactly why you're successful. And there's science to back that up. And, it's in a sense, this lifestyle I call, and I talk about this in my first chapter, self-loathing. And I know that's a really powerful, intense statement, but the way that we're living is not life affirming. It's self-destructive, and we need everyone to show up as their best selves, as their most resilient, as their shiniest, um, as their most thriving self, as you do, in order for them to be able to express their gifts in the best way. And it is so imperative not to fall for this idea of run, run, run. I have to live in fight or flight mode all the time,
Ah,
because that is actually the super highway to burnout. And if you're 20, you might not realize it. If you're 30, you might still be okay. But once you hit 40, forget about it. You will burn out. And that's too bad, because we need you to keep going. And having been on, the Yale campus and the Stanford campus in Silicon Valley and New York, and just seeing all these high achieving people so intent on proving their significance and their worth through their work, and yet no amount of accolades from the outside will make up from the hole in your heart because of a lack
mm,
of friendship from yourself.
what a powerful message to close our call. And this resonates with truth because that was my journey. And Emma, we'll talk after this episode because I'd love to get some articles and aspire from you. Such a powerful message. And I invite you to share your website and any link that you want to share. Give your main website, Emma, and everyone, all her information's right in the show notes.
Mhm. My latest book website is iamsov.com, like I am sovereign, but iamsov, IAMSOV.com. And then I'm on Instagram at The Happiness Track, where I'm putting out sovereignty messages. And also on other, other social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and so forth. Hmm.
Well, I am so grateful that we're connected. I love the work you're doing in the world. Thank you for joining me today. I was thrilled to share your book in Aspire Mag's top 10 inspiring books list. And
Thank you.
you're welcome. Until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.